Hello, good evening and welcome, as David Frost used to say. I'm Egil, and later on, oh here he is Bragi.
I am Bragi, the son of Magnar, and yes, I am a Viking.
And film projector.
Yes.
Anyway.
Producer, director.
Right, so we're going to be talking about the Viking Age according to you, yeah?
We are, this is the main idea of this live stream, to give it some structure, and we'll be talking purely on the Viking Age.
Right.
And what that means.
If we come to England, we're talking of the British Isles, the Viking Age was from about 793 right through to 1066. But that's not the whole story. I mean, those of you who saw the programme Viking Dead on the Yesterday channel see that we found a grave, and the grave of two ships, which is in present-day Estonia. The theory I've got is it wasn't a battle in the true sense of the word. What we've got, I think, is trading that went wrong. Now, why do I say that? Well, if you look at the shape of number 2 boat, it isn't a warship. It's too wide and squat. And I think what happened there was it may have been a deal that went wrong. But one thing that is obvious, of course, is Bragi's just got called away. What is obvious is, to me, is the people who were buried. They were buried with ceremony, and that means to me that they won the battle. So what is the significance of this burial? Well, it seems to me like they were buried in 3 ranks, rather like a shield wall, and perhaps that's what they were trying to represent. Things do move around in graves quite a lot, and you find that with bodies, in that bodies fill with gas, they explode, the rain comes in and bones float around and all kinds of things. So it's not out of the ordinary. They were making a big thing about there being a king's Nefertafel stone, his bag, a king's Nefertafel stone in his mouth. And they do actually say, and I agree with them, it is quite possible that movement, Brownian movement or whatever you want to call it, has distributed stuff around. Burials varied. I mean, there are even examples of sea burials where there's a long ship where traditionally burned. This case, the heading looked out to sea, and it's a proper long ship. Now, whether the 2 ships are contemporaneous, I don't know. It wasn't explained. It could quite conceivably be, I don't know, 50 years apart, one way or the other.
Ah, somebody watching now. Hello.
Hello. It's good of you
This
to
is
watch.
a live stream hangout with us, and we're going to be talking about the Viking Age.
Well, we're talking about a ship burial actually, so that's very different methods of burial. Sometimes you find stones in the shape of a long ship. You find cremations. We found that when we were digging at the Barbican in York. Cremations were quite common. The account we do have of a Viking ship burial is Ibn Fidan, the Arabian diplomat. And when they're burning the actual ship, a man turns to him and says, "We treat our heroes with respect. We don't let them become food for worms. We send them up to Valhalla in a cloud of smoke." It depends on the people.
Well, of course so, yes.
But it's a hard time to live. I mean, even the wealthy didn't have such a great time. I think it was Taiki actually who said to me, it's a great place you'd like to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there.
No.
Just have a drink of water.
Even the amount of wealth we have in today's terms, in Viking terms, I don't think we'll hold on to it for long if we went back.
Well, the point of wealth was if you got it, you didn't hang on to it, you distributed it. If you actually held on to it, that's a good cause for him to kill you.
Well, of course so, yes.
So, you know, it's one of those things. The average Viking male would have lasted about 30 years.
It's not very old, really, is it?
Well, women as well, giving birth was the most hazardous thing they
Well,
could
of course
do.
so. We take that for granted these days, and still, babies and children, women die giving birth.
Well,
So.
we have actually found skeletal evidence with a fetal skeleton half in and half out. The midwives were quite amazing with what they could do. But you imagine giving birth in a cowshed.
No, you couldn't really.
That's basically
we're
what
not
we're
women.
talking.
So.
No, but basically that's what you're saying.
Yes.
You're giving birth and
Especially winter,
and there's a cow leaning over, dribbling at you.
Well, children, they must have had to be a lot tougher in those days compared to the modern children.
They were tougher, but I mean, there were diseases that. One of the biggest killers, of course, was malaria.
Yes, we take that for granted, don't we?
And it's one of the things we take for granted is, say, I'm leaving here and going to Derby. I'm 99.999% sure I'll get there.
Yeah.
In the Viking time, you ain't got any guarantees at all.
Well, no.
You could meet a wild boar, you could meet a wild bear, wolves.
Wolves, yeah.
Or just ordinary people who want to
Just
kill
some
you.
wild people.
It could be something simple, or you could fall into a marsh. Because the land was different in those days. It wasn't cleared like it is today. You didn't even have proper roads. So, it's each generation absorbs its own thing.
Although we have been clearing land for a long time.
Oh yeah.
But the land would have been very rugged still, and a lot of woodland.
Well, a lot of wild creatures that want to kill you, and one thing people forget about are wild cats. Your little pussycat in the corner wasn't always a nice little pussycat. It was a big, fierce cat. I saw one at the zoo, busy munching its way through a rabbit. Looked up at me as if say, "Come on, son."
You ought to look at lynx, Yeah.
Well, it was not much. It was a bit smaller than a lynx, but they've still got them in Scotland. But they're fierce. They really are.
Yeah, you can see that. Yes.
Yeah. So you've got those kind of hazards, and even a simple thing like, say, you cut your finger. You put a bit of ointment on it and a plaster, and away you go. In those days, all you had was really a spider's web.
Well, of course so, yes.
You'd then get mushroom and you cut it, and then you could form a plaster. If you're wealthy, you put honey on it. But honey is, as far as they're concerned, the only thing honey is good for is making mead. It's the only sweetener you've got.
Well, of course so, yeah, you have no sugar.
And, well, it shows in the dental records. So even a cut finger can lead, and I remember repairing some shoes. I was watching Wimbledon many years ago. And, the awl, I tried to stick that through my finger, and guess what? It bled.
Well, it would do, yes.
This was about 2 in the afternoon. By 6 o'clock, it was like a Mars bar. It was huge, and I had to go to the A&E to get penicillin to sort it out.
Back in the day, the Dark Ages, that could have killed you.
Well, they'd have cut my thumb off.
So let's go back to basics. So let's, go pre-Viking age, and let's just talk about the Saxons and the build-up to the Viking raid. Although at the time they've been trading together, haven't they?
Well, the Vikings developed ships, which ships mean trade, and Anglo-Saxon England was extremely wealthy. It was the power of Europe. The Vikings would have traded with them and noticed this, of course. And in Portland, they came ashore to trade. The local reeve said they had to see the local king, and they said no. And they got a bit upset, a fight broke out, and the reeve was killed. That's the first. Then in 793, the monks of Lindisfarne were rudely awoken by Viking raid. Now, I don't think it's as simple as a bunch of guys in a long ship coming over and attacking them. Again, I think they were trading, things went wrong, somebody said something wrong, and it broke out like that. You have Bamborough Fort literally 4 miles away, and they saw the ships. They could not, but they were in and away before they could even.
Yeah, it's an
set
interesting
sail.
theory, that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some more evidence on that, naturally.
Well,
but,
the trouble is,
the lack of evidence is very hard to find.
well, all the accounts are based on Alcuin, and Alcuin got these 20 years after the event. It wasn't the massacre, from what I can find out, that people think. There were 3 deaths. 2 got killed by the Vikings and 1 either tripped up or accidentally drowned on the way to the long ship. Because don't forget, monks were ideal slaves. They're wealthy, they've got lots of wealth around them, and the worst thing they could do is, "Deus save me, God save me." And they used to be told what to do and to work hard. So the Vikings could channel that elsewhere and make a profit. Nuns are the same. So.
And what would the opinion and from the side of the monks? How are they seeing the raids?
It was,
to give it a balance.
Well, it's actually seen as a golden opportunity, because you'd think if your monastery had been raided, nobody would want to go there.
Oh no.
Quite the opposite. They had so many people wanting to go there, they had to put them elsewhere.
Well, Lindisfarne got much bigger, didn't it, afterwards?
Yeah. Well, what it was, the greatest thing in the Christian church at that time was martyrdom. And of course, what better way than these angry men from the north? There was even a prayer, "O Lord, save us from the fury of the Northmen."
Yes, very famous.
So, you know, that was looked on, as far as they were thinking, as a fast track to heaven. So yeah, let's get in there. The Vikings would select monasteries and go on this. It's no good attacking the same one over and over again, because they haven't got any wealth in. So once you go for Lindisfarne, let's find another one. Isle of Iona, things like that. But what they want is to be in, attack it, and come away quickly before the armies get. And this is where the longship was so important. You come in off the sea, up the estuaries, you only need 3 foot of water. You find a place that's undefended, get your guys out, attack, kill, take what you need and who you need, into the ships, back up the estuary out to sea. Because on an ordinary stand-up one-to-one battle, they're as good or as bad as the Saxons. It depends on the commanders. But it's hit and run. That was the main thing. And in fact, the word Viking means river pirate. You know, Vic. So there you have that. So do we have any questions at all?
Not yet, no. You
No?
keep talking. I've got to go
Okay.
downstairs.
Okay.
Talk about longships for longer and how they're constructed.
Yeah,
Because
well-
I thought I want to hear that.
Longships are a phenomenon. It's a fantastic thing, the longship. When a ship sails on the sea, as I'm sure those of you who have been on a ship know, when it goes and hits the wave, it hits it. A longship doesn't. It snakes over the waves and it makes a lot smoother transit. And this is why they were called sea snakes. If you ever get the chance to go on one, go on it, because they are fantastic. They're smooth as silk. I was on one in the Irish Sea with a 4.5 foot swell. Normally that's heads out to sea feeding the fish, but in this case I was sound. Now rowing, you see them and it's all woo, no. That way your back will be really aching by about an hour. What it is, you sit on something similar to this, a seaman's chest, you get your feet comfortable, and if I could do this without spilling the water, hang on a minute. You have it like the Greeks. Oh dear. It always happens at the wrong time. Drinking water a nuisance. And you hold it like that, and you row. And that you can do all day. And that means you can row for longer. They had a sail, obviously. What the sails were made of, we don't really know. Some say they were woven. We've even had people saying they were leather. They could have been linen, who knows. But we do know that they could sail so close to the wind. And they were effective. They travelled, as far as we know, as far as America. Whether this is the case or not, well, we do know that. They were the greatest explorers. So why? What happened in the end? Well, later on, a ship was designed which was taller and had castles. Which is where you get forecastle from.
Well, the medieval ship.
Yeah, and that meant they could look down on the long ship, so it was outmoded. I've been coughing like crazy because of the water going the wrong way.
Well, that's not a good idea on a
Well,
live stream.
Oh,
Never mind.
it was nearly a death stream. But so the longship itself had its own ships, like everything else. Technology evolves and things like that. How big were these? Well, the largest longship was not Egil Skallagrimson. I'm telling you a lie.
Oh, what's his name? The Norwegian man.
Yeah.
Trygvasson.
No.
What's his name?
He was a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Olaf, was it?
Olaf Tryggvason. Well
Yeah.
done, that man in the red hat.
Yeah.
It was Olaf Tryggvason who had 100 oars. I assume it's 50 each side. So, a very powerful ship, but that's the exception to the rule. Your normal raiding party, I think, could be about...
Somebody watching again. Hello!
Hi. Would be about 60 people. But the various trade, they've got other ships called the Njal, which is sort of shorter but wider berth, which meant you could carry much more cargo. So how do you tell you're being raided? I knew you were going to ask me that.
So how do you tell that you're being raided by the Vikings?
Right, first thing is the dragon head.
Oh.
Now the dragon head was detachable and it was designed specifically to frighten away the land spirits or landvitier. So you keep the head on if you're attacking. Another thing, if you look along the side, the shields are there. If you see no dragon head and no shields, you're going to be reasonably okay. But like most nations, they needed to trade. It's better to trade than to fight.
Well, of course so.
Because you never know, you could end up being dead, no matter how good you
And
are.
how important was money to a Viking?
Money itself, there was not really a moneyed economy till a lot later. There was money made, but chances are they'd make it into bracelets like you had on. There you go. They're more interested in jewellery. There was the silver penny, and there's more silver pennies found in the Scandinavia than there is in this country.
No.
At one part, the Saxons were paying off the Vikings, and it was estimated recently that it would be £10 billion a year they were paying.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, they even minted coins with Vikings in mind. You get the hammer and the cross on them.
Well, of course so, yes. I mean, and the manufacture of that amount of coinage, that took a lot.
Well, the trouble is they were financing trouble for the future, because the more money, the better the long ships, the better the weapons, the better you could
Well, of
arm
course so, you
people.
Hire a bigger army.
Well, the excavation at Trelleborg, which was a massive fortification, they think was training warriors to come over and fight here. And eventually came to the point, like I said, they would pay them not to raid. And of course, they had so much money, you'd find hordes of silver coins not used, you know, waiting to be melted down, I
Wow.
assume.
I'll have to find one of them.
Oh, you have to go to Scandinavia for that.
So you got the start of the Viking Age, you know, during attacking the Saxon kingdoms. So what was the Saxons of Saxony doing at this moment? How did they support the Saxon Kingdom of England?
Taxation, basically. The time of Alfred, he came across with the idea of the third, which is like you got his army in two, and you got one army standing ready in case the Norse attacked. And then when harvest time came, they went back and another lot came in. They were sort of like a militia, which worked reasonably well. The thing is, the downfall for the Vikings was they didn't have a unified leader. Alfred was.
Yes, you could see that.
And his family continued the
Well,
tradition.
of course so. There is a very strong family.
Well, it starts off, Alfred wants the Kingdom of England that we know today. He was getting on to be an old man. Athelflaed could have been a queen in her own right, but she said no. They invented the title of Lady, and she carried on training Edward the Elder's son, Athelstan. And sure enough, when Athelstan came of age, he became what's called Regia Anglorum, King of the English. He tried in vain to unite Scotland, not in a very subtle way. King Constantine was very annoyed with him because he was forced to swear an allegiance to him. And we know about the Battle of Brandenburg, where Constantine was killed. There's also another famous character who was friends of Athelstan, and that is Egil Skallagrimson.
Yeah, of course, yes. Your
Athel-
namesake.
Athelstan gave him a shield, which he was immensely proud of. And Athelstan was said to have a sword called Quernbiter.
Oh, yeah.
And it's said that his sword, with one stroke, could cleave a millstone in half. Not
Oh.
advisable, but...
No, but what a mighty sword that
Yeah.
must have been.
And, as I say, the rest is history. But the Saxons themselves, it was... When you think, Alfred was pushed into the marshes of Athelney.
Oh, yes.
Now, he could have asked help from the Saxons of Devon, my ancestors, and of Cornwall, but he didn't, because he was proving it's England together. Eventually, of course, everybody united with them. The big thing was when he beat Guthrum, and that was beginning forming the Danelaw, and then once you know where your borders are, you know where you're going to attack. But by that time Alfred was getting on, and Athelflaed was a chip off the old block, as was Edward the Elder.
Well, yes.
So that's basically the politics, I suppose. Everyday life, well, wouldn't much differ really whether you're Saxon or Viking. It's hard work. You're working, if you're a thrall or slave would mostly live with the family. There's no, you didn't mistreat a slave because they're expensive.
Well, of course, they cost money.
It's like beating your family car or SUV.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you don't do it because it costs you a lot of
But
money.
it's like killing your only horse you got,
Yeah, exactly.
or your only ox.
And in many cases, slaves were just friends of the family as well. They would apprentice, they'd help out around the farm, or whatever. The other aspect, of course, when a man marries his wife he loves, he gets his children and heirs out of that. And you have a concubine, which was chosen by the wife, and that's what you had sex with.
Oh, yes.
And you know, fair enough. You don't, because if the slave gets pregnant and dies in childbirth, you buy
Well,
another one.
Let's keep it family friendly.
No, but that is
Yeah.
the fact of life.
It is a fact of life.
So you have that. Now, as a child, if you're a boy, you would be following your father's trade at the age of 12. So, I don't know, say you're a farm manager, your son would learn from you. And in time of war, he'd be behind your shield, learning how to fight, and you would have taught him before.
So there's no such thing as education in those days then?
It depends on your status. If you're something like King Alfred, you are taught to read or write, or both, and you learn that from the Bible. You were taught how to rule.
Actually, you'd be taught to speak Latin as well.
Yeah, only unfortunately,
Wealthy.
the Latin that English people spoke, and this was one of the problems. You see the manuscripts, they
Yes.
sometimes are a bit pasted on. Well, English manuscripts were fantastic, but their Latin was terrible. It's a bit like the French policeman in Hello, Hello.
Yes.
It was that bad that they sent the monks back to Rome to relearn Latin. So it's good mooning, that sort of thing. And they learnt correct Latin. It's very interesting actually when you look at the service of the time. It's very like a rock concert.
Oh.
Now, the altar is your stage. It's in semi-darkness, and you have windows each side, so the light comes in like spotlights. They set pots in the wall like speakers, and the Gregorian chant, the rap of its time, so that when you're singing...
Oh, hello.
I've got another one.
So we have someone here, Quirky 2010s, hello.
Hi.
Hello, and they want to ask a question. Were the Vikings ruled by a king?
That's not as easy as you may think. It's not either a yes or a no.
Welcome to the channel.
Yeah. We had Jarls, who were like earls,
Yes.
and they are answerable to kings. But what is a king? Well, when I was a student, we were told a king is someone who exacts taxes. my interpretation of it, yes, it's somebody who can exact a tax and collect it.
Yes.
I could say to you,
Or
you
have
owe,
the authority.
yeah, and the strength. I mean, I could say to you, you owe me £1 million, to which your reply is,
Yeah, you're not getting it.
but if I'd got 20 blokes team-handed,
Yes.
you'd have to think again, and that's what a king is. Kings also were very sceptical of Jarls. The nickname for them was Gold Necks, because he thought they were more interested in getting necklaces than actually doing the job.
But there must have been lots of people trying to get that kingship as
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah.
You know, from your own family to your rivals.
But a king would be over a small territory compared with, say, a king today, which is king of a whole island.
So you could end up in a situation with many Viking kings.
Oh yeah, and especially in the Saxon times, the king named his successor. It didn't necessarily be his son. So sometimes you've got 2 or 3 kings ruling at the same time in the same area. The most king we know of course, is Redwald of East Anglia. But yes, in a way, yes, the Vikings were ruled by a king, but different areas. You know, you'd have a king
And
say,
would there be a difference between a Saxon king and a Viking king?
well, apart from they'll be trying to kill each other off and get their land, not really that much. But this was one of the problems with what is a king.
And could anybody end up being a king?
If
You
you
had
kill
the power and the money
yeah,
and
if you had the
motivation.
right, yeah, you've got the motivation. Theoretically, you could rise from a slave to a king, but you'd have to be.
Did that happen?
Not
Do you
as
know?
far as I know.
It's an interesting question. That I'd love to know
yeah.
that.
But as I say, it's something which, yeah, they were ruled by kings, but not a king didn't rule over one whole area. It was like
A multitude of areas,
Yeah,
a multitude of kings.
you may, I mean, we talk about high kings, low kings. There's no such thing. If you were a low king and I said to you, "Oh, you're a high king," I said, "Of course I am," because you paid tribute to each other to keep your power.
Well, of course so. I mean, there's always, you know, sending each other's daft presents of animals and you couldn't possibly keep.
If you're what's generically called a minor king, you're going to pay off your higher king, you know, in an act of bravado, because you don't want him invading
Well,
you.
of course so. You don't want to be invaded and have your kingship taken off you.
But anyway, that's a great question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Have any more questions,
Yeah.
Quirky?
Anybody else?
2010s? Please leave it in the comments. I have another person watching as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
hello.
that actually brings up a thing we had at university.
Yeah.
What is a king?
Mm.
We know what a king is today, but it's not as clear cut as people think they are.
No.
But it's worth debate, worth having a look at. But as I say, everyday people, I say the best bet is to go to Jorvik. It's really fantastic place to go. The smells are fantastic, and you could see. Now, their state of life was a lot.
So we have a question coming.
Oh, I've got a question. What's the
So
question?
did they always move their home, or more often staying in one place?
Now, it depends. If I'll use York as an example. If you go out of York slightly, there's a place called Bootham. That was the rough part of town. This is where the booths were and the tents, the intransigents. But you'd set down where you could make a living. Majority of them, if you got good water, good pasture, then you'd settle there. A place like Derby itself, as we said on another film, is that you had, say, about 50 to 100 people living there permanently, but you would have a lot of young warriors going to make a name for themselves. You'd have people of power looking for young warriors to hire. You'd have, shall we say, ladies of the night. You'd have spies everywhere.
Of course so.
But you have markets, and if you go to Derby, you've got Irongate, Sadlergate, and the marketplace. You go to York, you have Skaldergate, which is the place they made shields. Rougier Street, where they made jewellery. You have, of course, Coppergate or Coopersgata, where they made cups. So it tells you what trades were going on.
Yeah, well, let's just go back to the questions again, because I know in the sagas, for instance, if a family or an older of a family fell out with a king, in the sagas they would often talk about packing up the longhouse and moving. Now, would that actually happen?
What happens under the law? Say you kill somebody.
Yes.
There's no death penalty.
No, not if you declare it.
Right, so we go to the whole thing. You're held on trial. You killed, I don't know, Taiki's brother.
Yes.
And his price is 20 silver pennies. You pay that, and you're also exiled for 3 years, which means you have to leave Danelaw in 24 hours, and you pack up anything you can with you, and whoever will come with you. After that, you can be killed by anybody.
Yeah, there's somebody else watching there. Hello and welcome.
Hi. So it's actually a brilliant system because, okay, when you've left your farm, they take whatever they want, and after 4 years, you've got a new living, say, in Leicester.
Yes.
You're not going to come back. You're doing all right, thank you very much. Might have done you a favour. And you've got away from that area. Okay, your old farm, well, let them have it. So everybody's happy, and the family of Taiki's got compensation, which is far more useful to them than seeing them dangling from a rope.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, they did sometimes have that.
It must be a big job to move a whole house, though.
Well, basically all you did was you load the cart up, find your money and all your valuables, and if your wife comes with you, great. If she doesn't, well, you'll have to find another one.
Well, I bet some of them would have left the wife behind and
Oh,
gone.
yeah, I've just got on a horse and ridden off.
Yep. So, any more questions, or we'll carry on talking?
I'll have a quick drink of water.
Yes, it's very thirsty work doing this.
Especially
We've had a busy day filming today as well.
Oh, yes.
So we've done the latest vlog episode 16. Well, I don't think it actually said episode 16 in it. Never mind.
We did at the very beginning.
Did we? Right.
It came out with the same joke. Didn't think we were going to make it. But yeah. But everyday life was hard. And things people don't understand is the alcohol content that children would have had. The beer would have been about 2%.
Like a shandy.
Well, yeah. But what they don't realise is you go out, you pick up the apples, mush them up with a bit of water, leave them for 3 weeks, and you've got cider.
Yes.
Yeah, do that with pears, you have perry, which is like almost like a champagne. So, alcohol, well, you say, well, why are they drinking that? Well, because the water was all kinds of bugs in it. You've got typhoid, you've also got dysentery, and there will be worms in there which will go
Dead
around.
bodies.
Oh, you know, well, you name
To be
it.
in a major city, like
Yeah.
town like York.
And milk was, again, unless you made it into cheese, you're going to get the same liquid-borne diseases.
Well, we take that for granted, that we can easily turn a tap on and get some nice fresh water. But unless you're lucky, you lived in a remote area with a natural spring that's not contaminated, we really do take water for granted in this modern world we live
if
in.
you look at Jorvik, the lavatory is right next to the well.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
No, well, it doesn't to us.
No, but
they-
to them it did.
yeah. Well, I mean, again, water, you give it the animals.
And I suppose as an archaeologist, you've got to be very thankful that they threw things away.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about archaeology is you're looking at other people's rubbish. It's interesting if you compare the past with what we've got today and what will survive. But as I say, the Viking life is, you didn't throw things away, you dropped it on the floor, pressed it in. And each generation is a layer. And if you can imagine a layer cake 15 to 30 foot high,
Yes, it's a lot.
and each layer has that generation. But you learn a lot from that in the orange beads were of the 9th century. And that's it, because we only found orange beads in that layer. We learn also from the coprolitic material, poo, we learn their diet, we learn their parasites, and it must have been
Oh
pretty
yeah.
rough.
Well, you carry on talking about that and then start talking about trade whilst I just get downstairs again.
Yeah, well,
Most sorry about that, old chap.
oh, don't worry about that. So anyway, I mean, we're talking about parasites and coprolites. Well, it's not as distasteful as it sounds. Coprolites harden off and mineralise. And what we do is we put them in a bottle of acid, screw the top down, give them a shake, unscrew it and smell it. If it stinks to high heaven, it's probably human. So then the contents of that are sieved and we pick out bits. Certain things are not absorbed by the body. Various seeds. Now apples were small, they're about the size of a golf ball, and you ate the whole thing. They ate sloes, plums, which are pretty small, and they ate the whole thing. And of course these pass through the system, they go out in the usual manner, and we found things like cherry stones have got teeth marks from mice on it. Coprolite from dogs would have lots of bone pieces in. And we also found eggs. We found eggs from tapeworms, which were quite common. You'd have 500 or 600 of these zipping around inside, and when you went to the laboratory you would pass these worms, and in the end you get what's called a prolapse rectum, which you don't want to know about. It looks pretty bad. Another one is from urine of sheep. This is why you don't drink water. There would be a worm that would burrow through the pipes, and as say I'm talking to you, a worm may come out my nose, ears, mouth, or out the corner of my eye. And everybody had these. These were unpleasant, but they were there. So as I'm talking to Bragi, he looks at me and there's a worm coming out the corner of my eye, and he goes, "Oi!" It's a bit like today if you've got a runny nose and you're talking to somebody. And they say, "Oh, wipe the candlesticks."
Is that where the term snake in the eye comes from?
Probably.
Did he have a worm in his eye?
Yeah. This was quite common. And as I say, with tapeworms as well. And you'd have to pass the head. But even so, there's a lot of... This is why people weren't fat like I am. Now imagine, Bragi, you had your breakfast this morning.
I did.
And if he was a Viking man, he'd have 1 spoon of food for him, 1 spoon of for the worms, the other spoon for the worms, 1 for him. So you've got to eat 3 times the amount you do now to stay the same shape.
It's very gruesome, really, isn't it? Oh, I'll never watch it again.
Yeah,
Hello.
hi. It's basically life. We are shielded today in so many ways.
I mean, we're very lucky you go to the supermarket, or your veggies washed for you and sprayed with chemicals. You're not going to get worms.
Well, also the thing
You
is...
shouldn't do.
Well, you won't get them in this country.
Well, you do occasionally.
Well, very rarely. But the thing is, you're used to eating at least 3 times a day.
Well, of course so, yes.
You know, it's even the same, 3 square meals a day. In the Viking age, Saxon age, if you're lucky to eat once a day, the very wealthy, of course, yes. And their meal would be about this time. You'd have a light breakfast, if you could afford it or got it, maybe oats with a bit of fruit. And then,
porridge.
Yeah, and then about this time of night is when the feasting will begin. But if you're a poor old peasant, that's when you go to bed, mate, and your stomach's going bloop, bloop. So there's all kinds of things. Now, we did talk earlier about people cutting themselves. Now imagine, you've been in a battle and you've had a stomach wound. What do we do? Well, the ladies of the house would make a porridge with lots and lots of garlic, lots and lots of onion. They'd make you eat it. Wait a couple of hours, and then they would smell your wound. And if they could smell garlic, then you're headed for Valhalla. There's nothing they could do, because that means your intestines are cut and it's leaking out.
Oh, not good.
No. Otherwise, they'd bandage you up and hope for the best. These bandages might well be very filthy, but they didn't know any better.
Would they have known about using maggots to clean up a wound?
I don't know as such. I'm sure that possibly they could have found out. Now, penicillin, as we know, is a relatively new thing.
Yes.
However, the Arab stable boys used to rub mildewy bread on wounds, and I'm sure it may have, with the Vikings travelling, you know, to the Varangian Guard, they would have seen this.
Yeah, you could see that, yes.
There are some crazy things like, you know, you're drinking out of a bell and having sheep drinking stale ale and stuff like that. and eating turnips in a cold bath. But there was a lot of herb lore that the wise, and this was the job of the women, was to learn about the herbs. The housewife would tell the daughter about herbs, which ones to use and for what reason, and they would learn and use them, and it was pretty effective. You did the best with what you can with what you've got. It's easy for us to sit up and
Well,
say,
it's a very old craft, isn't it? A herb craft.
well, yeah, I mean, the monks actually went round and asked these wise women about it. There were herbs they used to enable childbirth to go easier. They even had feverfew for hay fever, lungwort, things like that. And these are what,
But not a bane. Don't use a bane.
well, they would know about it, and various herbs and things like that. And that's something. I mean, I've looked at Culpepper's herbal, and a friend of mine, she's just become a
Right, back
master
in a second.
herbalist.
You carry on.
Yeah, and of course, these things are important. You need to be able to heal people. As I say, Bragi's nipped off. He'll be back in a bit. So that was part and parcel of everyday survival. So what sort of things would the average person eat? Well, basically, not much meat. If you were poor, you ate vegetables. Bear in mind we didn't have potatoes, but you had sweets, you had cabbage, various other things like that. If you could get meat, you got it. We even found that in York, in a settlement, even a badger had been got at. But they didn't eat ravens, crows, because these were sacred animals of Odin. If you are lucky, you get wild boar or deer or wild pigs. And yeah, kill a bear, that's good food. And you get, of course, fur from it. The drinks were ale, and then you had mead. Now, if you got married, the bride would be given mead for a month, and this is where we get honeymoon from. Mead was pretty pricey, and if you had a oh, he's back.
I'm back again.
If you
Back
had a
again.
beehive, then that was serious. If you say Bragi got a beehive, you'd be expected. He'd expect honey from that for a certain period, and the king would be pretty quick on the uptake because it's a valuable commodity.
Well, definitely, you'll get quite a few poundage of honey from a hive.
Now, wine was, the average wine in this country was pretty bad. However, for the price of a slave, you get Greek wine, which was good. And we've got cases of that happening. If you go to Tintagel,
Yes.
they have found that it was a thriving port with bits of amphora, which wine and olive oil comes in. So some of the diet was pretty good. Now, they ate a lot of dried cod. It's a bit like they have today, is it hacky?
Yeah.
Now people think, oh, you can't chew that. Well, you're not supposed to. You soak it in water overnight, so you get that now. You get wild garlic, put that in, and then you boil the fish or fry it, and the juice, you've got a nice garlicky sauce to pour over it.
Oh yes. I mean, we think about the food being very bland.
Oh,
But if it was rich, then the food would have been very rich for you. A lot of choice.
Even poor people could go out and pick wild garlic. You know, if you go to Cromford, bus stop there, you could smell it, and you can eat the flowers, the root, and the leaves. They all have a different, but they're very garlicky.
And some of these meals would have dozens and dozens of courses, wouldn't they? So
well,
also
also
going to a banquet.
with the trade, you've got the Varangian Guard. You get things like pepper. And you get introduced to mace and stuff like that. But that would be for the very, very high up people. But salt was essential. And we did find in Northamptonshire a place where they were making salt. Malden in Essex, of course, is a long tradition.
Yes.
And basically you do a pan, you bring salt water, seawater in, seal it off, and the sun bakes it, and then you dry out the salt that way. But you have to have salt to live.
What would be the most common tradable item in the day?
I would have said salt is the most important, depends if you could make, if you got all of wealth, whether you have kings, religious priesthoods, whatever, relies on one thing: surplus. And who generates that? The farmer. And you have to have a surplus. Now, yes, you can, if you've got a farm or a strip of land, that feeds you and the family. But how do you make it through winter? How do you get clothing?
Well, of course so. You have to trade for it.
You could trade for the cloth. If you're lucky, you've got sheep and you have weavers at home and you can spin. But you then go to the marketplace, say in Derby, you go to the market. You then needn't necessarily use money. Maybe you make a lot of cheese. So say, okay, I'm okay, I've got some.
Oh.
So if you say to you, say, I need a skeleton, give me cheese for that. How much do you want?
Oh.
So you weigh out.
£10.
Well, you weigh out whatever it is. If you wanted to pay, maybe you wouldn't pay with coin, but you would pay
With some hack silver.
Yeah. There's a reason for that, because argument's sake, say Bragi has, I don't know, 1,000 silver pennies.
I wish.
Yeah. Every 10 years, he would have to take these over to Armand Alley in Derby, where the money would melt them down and strike them. And 10% of that would be divided up between, no, the third would go to the king, a third would go to the money, and you get your third back.
About the other 10%.
Well, if you can, but the point
Does
is,
that get cheated out of you?
the point is, in about 10 years, if you do that, you're going to have nothing.
Well, no, of course not, no.
So
make
what
it
does
into
he do?
jewellery.
You make it into jewellery.
Can't
And
touch that.
I'll say, maybe that's, maybe that's the weight of 5 and that's the weight of 10 silver pennies.
So you could say tax fraudation, you could say, is an old thing.
But also, you, all right.
That's right, we're
So anyway, they called it Mecklenburg.
We're back again.
And these were the elite troops, a bit like the SAS or the SEALs. You know, these guys, they were hard. And later on, one of them called Harold Hadradi, or Harold Hardman, left them and tried to take the throne of England. So, oh yeah, I have a picture of me all on my own.
Yeah, there we are.
These guys,
Not
they
blue.
were hardened warriors. You served your time, you were very well paid, and then you went off back to where you came from. It was a young man's game.
Yeah, we're still on.
We're still on. Jolly good. Anyway, so that was the Varangian Guard, and they would fight in Constantinople or wherever they were told to fight. And they were the guys. So
Were they like the ultimate Vikings then?
yeah, they were a military elite. The nearest thing would be the SAS, the SEALs. You know, the
So, a bunch of Vikings you don't want to mess around
oh,
with.
you don't mess
Upset.
around. Well, you don't mess around with any of them, but yeah. And as I say, from Constantinople, that area.
And did
yeah.
you get? Did you have to be invited to join, or if you heard, you know, there you are, you're living in Norway, and you've heard of the Varangian Guard, could you just set sail and go and join, or
I think if you had a reputation,
would they seek you out?
possibly, maybe you're introduced by a member of the
We
Varangian
now have
Guard.
5 people watching. So
Hi.
hello, thank you
Yeah.
for watching.
They were the toughest ones, and to be honest, how they recruited, I don't know.
No, well,
But what they did recruit was the best of the best.
yes. We are going to make a video on the Varangian Guard at some point in the future.
They
watch
were
out for
not
that.
like the typical Vikings. They would have the full trousers
Yes.
and a pointed helm.
Yes, we don't really have any kit for them yet.
No, but
And fan braces.
oh yeah, and they'd be very wealthy as well. You didn't argue with them.
No, certainly not.
But so anyway, let's move on. What are we talking about now?
Well, anything to do with the Viking Age.
Oh right, anything.
So when did the Viking Age generally end in Britain? We all think of it at 1066, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. October 1066.
But the Vikings still continued to raid Scotland afterwards.
The Vikings in Scandinavia, I mean, they were going on to about the 12th century.
Well, they were,
I mean, the
yes.
Swedes weren't Christianised until the 12th century. The last place in Britain to get Christianity was the Isle of Wight.
Was it?
Yeah, that's very odd, you'd think. But no, it was the last place in this country to
Didn't
get
know
it.
that.
Yeah. And the success of Christianity is down to literacy. If you write runes, yes, you can write your name in runes, cast spells and all this lot. But they didn't have books in the sense that we do now. And say, your great-grandfather wrote down, I don't know, eat lots of greens. That way we don't upset people. And 200 years later you come across it and it says, oh, eat lots of greens. So you do. So what it is those words, they carry through the ages. And education is the great thing.
Yeah, I've got a question here.
Oh, right, that's the question. I can't
just finish off.
So you would then be able to carry on, hence the Bible. Parts of it are very old because it was written down. Whereas if it's mere narration, it changes, the Chinese whispers. And it becomes altered over the years. And I believe I had another question.
Yes, this one, QWERTY, 2010s.
Hi, QWERTY.
It said, were the Vikings, or did they have good relations with the neighbours?
Well, I think it's like anywhere else. You had good and bad. By neighbours, do you mean next door neighbours?
Well, I think it'll be a combination of both. It'll be a combination of who you live next door to, but who was the local country next door to you.
Well, to be honest with you, I think,
We'll cover both.
Yeah. It was said by Ibn Fadan, if you've done no harm to a Norseman, they'll leave you in peace. Upset them and they'll all come at you. The relationships. There were things called blood feuds, and some of them lasted for about 60 years.
Oh, generations.
I have a book by a late tutor of mine, he's dead now, bless him, and this is about a blood feud. And they could carry on for generations. It could be all kinds of things. It's like the feuds in America, was it the McKinleys and...
Well, yes.
Yeah.
McCoys.
And it's things like, maybe your grandfather, maybe, I don't know, accidentally took 2 of our sheep. And I said, well, those are our sheep. No, they're not.
Not even that.
And then we fall out. And it carries on and carries on. And they can be devastating. Kings have had to intervene at certain points sometimes because of these blood feuds, and wars can start.
Oh yeah.
So, it's, the relationships can be pretty bad. They can be very good, but when they go bad, boy, do they go bad.
I mean, you're talking about burning of long houses with the people in, and
well, when we were doing looking at the that film where the longhouse is burning, that's where it comes from. I hear about.
So that's the Last Kingdom.
Yeah, the Last Kingdom. They would burn people while they're asleep.
We'll record those 2 videos next week.
Yeah, but the fact of people being burnt alive while they were asleep or feasted was quite normal. And that's what blood feuds are about. And it's not just the families, it's the retainers with them. So you've got little armies sometimes feuding for years.
And of course, you have other families that will support other families, and then that will make the situation far worse,
Well, the sad thing is, if you're a poor peasant living on the land and you've got all these warriors coming over your land and whatever, you could get killed. And if you're not killed by that, then they trample your crops and you've got nothing to eat for the winter. In other words, you die. So it affected everybody in that area.
I mean, let's say you had a small farmstead, what would your borders consist of?
Well,
or your boundaries?
Well, if you're a peasant, you have hidage. We see it in there. Hide is about 1 acre of land. It's enough land to sustain a family through the year. So if you've got good soil, it's not as big as somebody who's got poor soil. But that would be you to look after and feed your family on. So, it could be as big as your garden, or it could be twice the size of your garden. Either way, it doesn't really encourage you to have a big family, but you can have several hides of land. And the difficulty with that is you'll have a strip of land, say, just outside. The next one will be several feet over. So you've got to know which one's yours. I assume they must have marked them
Well, a lot of the boundaries would have come from the Neolithic times and from that, haven't they? Because
Well,
they did, put boundaries on land.
you can see today where strip farming was.
Yes.
Hedges were used, of course, and one way of telling how old a hedge is by the number of species in that hedge.
Yeah, you get like a 30-foot section.
Yeah.
And I think for every species you had, was it 50 years or something to it?
Well, if it's got 10
I
or
forget
more,
now.
it's about 1,000 years if you've got 10.
Well, at some point we'll go and find
Yeah.
some old hedgerows and talk about that.
And hopefully we won't get shot at by an angry farmer.
Well, we'll do it on the Menor Langley estate,
Yeah.
won't
Oh.
you, it was?
He might set his poodle on this.
Another question. So, from QWERTY.
Okay, QWERTY.
So, how did the Vikings good at both exploration and warfare compared to other civilizations in Europe?
Very highly, because,
I'd say so.
yeah, I mean, if you do a DNA test, Viking blood is in all kinds of people because they travelled. We know that they came to France, Spain, of course England, Ireland, America.
Oh, yes.
We know they're in Estonia now. Russia.
Baghdad.
Yeah.
So, we got that far.
Constantinople. I'd love it if they found one in Australia. Wouldn't that be great?
Yes. Yeah,
But-
I doubt it. We never know.
Well, even the Mexicans, they talk about blonde-haired, blue-eyed, straight
there's lots of
devils
I
from the
mean,
sea.
There are lots of accounts by lots of seafaring nations or tribes that talk about lost lands and so
Yeah.
forth. So it's all very interesting.
Well, also the
the Salish, they talk about that.
Well, the Vikings, the nearest I think you'll get to great explorers were the experiments by Thor Heyerdahl, the reed boats, and they, where he travelled right across the countries on a reed boat. It was called Ra, I believe. It was in the 70s.
Yes,
yeah.
well, there are two. I've got it downstairs.
That's it, yeah. It was an amazing piece of work.
It was, and it proved the theory that they could take a craft made out of reeds and travel it all that distance.
But I mean, the Vikings would compare equally with those. Their navigation skills, then it's the knowledge of the sea, even from the colour of the sea. When you see them dropping the lead in for the levels,
Yeah, with the bit of
bit
stuff
of,
on the
bit
end,
of fat, so you know what the sea bottom's like. You look at the birds. If there's lots of seabirds, there's land nearby, and if they're flying around crazily, the storm's coming.
Now, if the Vikings, let's say, were terrible at sea craft, terrible sailors, would they have got to where they would have been? Would they have been that big and famous? But wording it badly there.
Even great sailors, Nelson suffered from seasickness.
Yes, oh, it's safe.
Yeah, hi, safe. And even Nelson suffered from seasickness. But on a long ship, you'd have to be hard put to suffer seasickness because it's that smooth. Navigation, well, if you're coming from Norway to attack, you set your base up in the Orkneys, which is a day's sailing, and then you just sail down, following the coast, and opportune comes up, you attack. So it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, so we've got a comment from Safe.
Okay, Safe, what does that say?
Safe says, "Hi guys,
Hi.
hope you're both well." Yes, we
Yeah.
are. Thank you very much for asking, and I hope you're very well too, Safe. And he says, "Who are your favourite historical figures and why?"
Yeah, it's a bit like a box of chocolates.
Well, let's
What's
keep
your
them in the
favourite?
dark ages to simplify.
Queen
it.
Athelflaed.
Yes.
She is my favourite because she, as a woman, booted the Vikings out of Derby. She established Chester as a city again.
Yes.
Northampton. These places were just ruins when she got there, and she built them up. And she started to form our language and our nation. Without her, we'd be talking a form of old numbers.
Well, her dad did quite a lot as well. But,
Oh, Alfie.
oh yes, I mean Alfred's the greatest,
Yeah.
probably one of my favourite historical figures, and that says a lot coming from a Viking.
Well,
But
she
he
didn't
was a
get,
great king.
she doesn't get the publicity.
No, she doesn't
deserves.
get the publicity. But
Uh,
you know,
But yeah, so who's yours?
well, it probably would be Alfred the Great, but then characters like Leif Erikson comes to mind, and his father,
Egil
is it-
Skallagrimson.
Egil Skallagrimson. So there's so many tremendous characters within that period of history, and we still remember today, and that's fascinating
Yeah.
and
Well,
incredible.
as the Vikings said, cattle die, kin die, thyself one day will die. One thing that never dies is word fame.
Yes.
So whilst you're mentioning them, they're still alive. So Egil is still alive. Athelflaed,
Of course so, yes.
Alfred is still alive. Guthrum is still alive.
This is partly why we're doing this, because
Yeah.
this is what we think a Viking will be doing today.
But
I
also,
can't go out raiding local villages, but I can raid YouTube with decent content, can't we?
but these people are what made you, you.
Yes.
They're in there, there are genes from those people are in you. And top businessmen, people like that. And yeah, you know, so, you know, be proud of who you are.
Well, you have to remember your heritage and your
Yeah.
ancestors. And that's another reason why we're doing what we're doing. It's respecting our ancestors. It's so that we're not going to forget the Vikings and the Saxons.
Well, my ancestors are actually Saxon. They came over and landed in Branscombe,
Yes.
which is my mother's maiden name. They were basically churchmen, from what I can gather.
Well, perhaps you might talk about that in a video.
Yeah. Well, there's even an image of one in the Cathedral of Exeter. But another
Comment from
question.
Safe. So thanks. Lots of names and stories to research.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other day I was researching the folklore of trolls, and I was reading about a Viking skald poet called Bragi. Can't remember his last name, but I'm going to do a video on him. And there's all these characters we never hear about, and they all deserve to be told and talked about.
Bragi is mentioned in the Flighting of Loki. He's
Yes.
a servant.
Yes, he is. Yes.
Yeah. Because, you know, he was on about, I'll give you a horse if you calm down.
Well, I chose a name because
Yeah.
it's one of Odin's name, and of course the god Bragi is the god of poetry, so that's the reason why I chose that name. A lot of people tend to go for Thor as a very popular surname, and have that in the name.
This stood off show up nicely on the TV screen.
Yeah, it does, yes.
Yeah.
Because you've got to do that video one day
Yeah, well, I want to do
for
it
your
winter
lady fans.
Yeah.
You,
want to do it before the winter
well, you best
comes.
do it in the next couple of weeks then,
Okay.
unless we have a nice late Indian summer.
Prepare yourself, ladies.
Yes, we'll give advance warnings. It'll be a
Sick bags will be provided.
yes. And you know, I think the Viking Age is such a brilliant subject to talk about, and perhaps in the next hangout and live stream we'll talk about the Saxon Age, because we can't forget the Saxons, and especially with our great fan and friend Thorbert, who completely loves Saxons,
Well,
and we do love him for
Again,
it.
you know, I mean, Saxons, Vikings, it's an amazing period.
Well, it is.
Now, here's the interesting thing. You remember we were reviewing the Kirk Douglas film,
Yes.
The Vikings.
Good film, that.
So much of that is based on truth. There was Einar. There was the King of Northumbria. He didn't have dogs, but he was blood-eagled.
Yes.
One of the two cases of this country, which is probably worse than the dogs that he had. But the story is based loosely on the King of Northumbria.
So would you prefer to be blood-eagled, or would you prefer to have your belly cut and your intestines?
Oh, the walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather not. I'd rather just kill myself quickly.
Well, maybe. Oh, yes.
Or throw myself in a very high place. The walk, yeah, that was pretty bad.
That
They
was
did that.
brutal.
Well, in 1012 was the Battle of Clontarf.
Yes.
Brian Boru was killed in his tents, and that was by Vikings, of course. And the Vikings who did it were captured by other Vikings who got that there. And the walk, that's what they did to them. They nailed a certain anatomy to the tree, slit them,
Ouch.
and they prodded them and made them walk round, so they disemboweled themselves. And that's to say, we had a business arrangement, don't mess with it. So yeah, make sure it's water.
We'll have to add that to the
Yeah.
list of content ideas.
Yeah,
There's so many battles to cover, so
Oh.
many buried hordes to cover,
Yeah.
so many subjects of folklore to cover.
oh, absolutely.
We're going to be busy for a very long time on this channel.
Wow.
This is one of the things I like, because
Yeah.
I hate to be on a channel where you're struggling for content.
Well, one thing we're not struggling for is content.
No,
is
we've
it?
got the
Yeah.
opposite problem.
Yeah, well,
But it's a good problem to have.
yeah, better that than nothing, you know. But the Viking Age it's amazing how it changes. There was a program on television, and it was about the Romans, but how they're perceived. And one of my heroes of archaeology was the late and great Sir Mortimer Wheeler. He wasn't popular at York. Well, I thought, well, he was, if you talk to people of a certain generation, he is the one who opened archaeology up to everybody. He was a phenomenal guy. Anybody who kept Magnarsson in line has got to be good.
Well, yes.
He was a brigadier after the war, but he was he invented a system of trench digging, and if you can imagine a bulk there, and like a piglet
Cross section.
yeah, like piglets feeding off and forming squares, and that was served two purposes. One, if you got somebody who was totally bad at archaeology, they only messed up one bit.
Yes.
Secondly, he could walk along the balks and get an overall picture of the site. And I think that's brilliant, and he doesn't get enough credit for it. It's not a system that's used now, because now you've got things like ground penetrating radar.
Well, of course I am.
But if you can't afford it, and let's face it, it's expensive, that's a way of doing it. And it's a good way of training people.
So you've seen archaeology change a lot then over the
It
years?
changes phenomenally. I mean, now, I'm 20 years out of date plus. You know, we used to use theodolites. Now they use a thing called an EDM, which gives you three-dimensional picture.
Oh, yes.
But it doesn't hurt to learn the basics.
No, of course not, no.
But I mean, I was in the beginning of the resistivity, which is you have 2 points and you measure the resistance of the Earth, and if it's been disturbed, the resistance is less.
Yeah, oh, yes.
It originated through the Moors murderers when they were trying to find graves, which is great unless you've got wet soil, and then it tends to monkey things up a bit. But you've got more reliance on ground penetrating radar and on resistivity, whereas you dug things. Another thing that's come to the fore with this weather is flying over it and you find scorch marks.
Oh yes, you'll see them.
You could, and one of the things is, you could see that in the lay of the land. So you've got a field of crops, and where there's a wall, it's going into the substance of the wall. It doesn't grow as well, so it forms a line and a pattern. And they found that out in the 20s. But the trouble was, they did all these and they couldn't find out where they were. But now they're doing it GPS. GPS is now the big thing in archaeology. There's a lady in America and she was finding sites in Egypt.
Oh yes, I saw that programme.
And she was doing it about the Viking sites.
She did, yeah, it's a very interesting programme. I think we talked about that already on video.
But that's the future of archaeology. But the thing I must say about archaeology is, go to your local people. You don't need a degree in archaeology. This is where Time Team is so good, even though they did me out of a job. You could do that. They will show you how to dig. In pensioners, on one dig I was on, we had a load of pensioners in a sort of, you know, the terrapin, and we brought the finds in. They put them in water, scrubbed them down, and they say, "Oh, what's this?" We tell them, and they've got lots of tea and lots of talking, which is great.
A question from QWERTY 2010. Did the Vikings really discover America?
They discovered part of it.
Yes.
As far as we know, Lansdowne Meadows, that's a good bet. And the thing is, they called it Vinland or Vinland. There's a difference. Vinland means wide open space. Vinland means wine. Now they found grapes, but grapes don't grow there, so they would be further south. And if you're a sailor in a ship, the logical thing to do is to follow the coastline, which is a long way. And you stop off where you can find fresh water. As we said earlier, the Mexicans have a legend of blonde-haired, blue-eyed devils.
Well, of course so, yes. Yeah.
And
where did they get that from?
Yeah. The sites may not have been found.
That's all right.
The sites may not yet have been found, but I'm sure we will find them.
I think in time it will happen.
Yeah. And they certainly had contact with America. And I don't see, you know, I mean, Columbus got the idea from somewhere. But I think, yes, I think we could say they found parts of America and Canada.
Yeah, I've certainly found the continent of America.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a lot of debate in the 13th and 14th century talking about how some of the Crusaders were allegedly meant to have travelled to America.
No, I don't know.
If you ever watched the series,
Oak Island.
The Curse of Oak Island, that does speculate a lot about that. But yet again, it's speculation, and there's no real evidence of that yet.
What gets me is they spend a fortune digging, and they've found little bits, but nothing.
So Quirky asked, why didn't they stay there?
That was because the Native Americans didn't want them there.
Well, you could understand that.
We have the Vinlander saga, and they were willing to trade, but the Vikings wouldn't trade swords with them, and that's what they were after. And eventually they kept attacking. Now, in the Vinlander saga, there was a woman who allegedly, quote, slapped her bare breast with a sword, which frightened the locals and inspired the others. But they stayed there about 3 years. Whether or not they traded after that, I'm pretty certain they must have done.
I mean, surely they must have gone back and then told other people.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Or we'll never have heard of the evidence of it from the sagas. So.
But the thing was, they were in advance of the locals, but not that far. And there were more of the locals than there were.
Well, the locals
Vikings.
were used to living off the land there. The Vikings weren't.
Yeah. So they pulled up stumps and left. But we have evidence and also meadows, as I say, Newfoundland around there.
Yes.
Which, yeah.
But it makes sense if they got from Iceland to Greenland, they'll
Yeah.
go from Greenland to Newfoundland.
And follow the coast down, because
it makes sense.
Was it in Labrador where the grapes were grown?
But this is where you get the old thing about forbidden archaeology. And I know you see a lot of these YouTube videos where they talk about how some archaeology and some things are hidden from us. And yes, we do live in a society that's secretive. We have secret sats, and most governments do, and we don't know what's actually going on, you could say. So it's the reason why we don't hear much about the Vikings finding America is because they don't want to change the archaeology of Columbus.
Well, also, I have to say there's a certain attitude in certain parts of academia that if you can disprove what they say, they throw the toys out the crib, and you know, if it doesn't fit their theory, they don't want to know.
Yes.
Whereas, to be honest, you've got to be open-minded. People are people, and they don't always perform the way you think. And loads, who knows? I mean, there could have been Vikings who settled with the Native Americans, married into it, and I believe they found a Viking coin in one village in America. You know.
Well, there's I think in Pennsylvania, a Norwegian farmer by chance found a Thor's hammer in the 19th century. Although that's often been speculated about whether it was been planted.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine there would have been Thor's hammers knocking about, surely.
The problem you have is people muddying the water, like the runestone that was found.
Well, there's that classic Time Team episode where they all thought they was digging a old Roman well, and it wasn't. It was just some Victorian guy who planted a lot of objects there from all over England, from many different eras.
Well, there's two major Viking ones. There's the King stone and the map that was found in a library in Yale, I think. But it was found in a book, and it's been proven that both of those are fake. Yes. Which is a shame. But it's when people say, well, if it didn't happen, it ought to happen. Well, that doesn't always...
Well, maps are another very interesting subject, because you have that Turkish guy, I can't remember his name, who had a map that was passed down to him, and it showed, you know, there's the South Pole, and we didn't know about the South Pole, and it showed the American continent. And this map's proven to be a real map. If I ever remember the name, I'll mention it in a live stream or again. Or
well, the map that was found about the Vikings was actually done by students.
Yes.
And yet, well, there are jokes where people put fake runic inscriptions and various other things to pass the time, but it does muddy the waters quite a lot. And what you've got to do is to find the real stuff, apart from...
And that can be difficult.
Yeah. Especially if you've got students who know what they're doing. So,
I mean, I would have thought if they found America, you would have thought, well, a season, and they would have gone back, told everybody, and brought a load of people back.
Well, apparently,
and found a country.
From what I can gather, they stayed 3 years.
They must have suffered badly.
They must have caused something of an upset with the locals, because basically you don't want to cause trouble unless there's a reason. You'd probably find it in the Vinland Saga. But again, I mean, they have a lifespan. I mean, if you go to Greenland, everything seems hunky-dory for 500 years, and then people are suddenly dying of starvation. Well, that's because they built a cathedral there, and they were told you're not to follow pagan ideals. Well, for centuries, what it was, the Inuit tribe there, you say, oh, you do it this way, and then you say this prayer to this god, and you do that. Well, they weren't allowed to do that, so they didn't plant it, and in a way, they shot.
Well, the Newfoundland area would have been, I think, the Micmac Indians and the Abenaki. Well, I think they might be later.
But
We've got a question
one of the,
here.
what's the question?
It's from Qwerty, and it says, were the Vikings fascinated with dragons?
The dragon is one of those universal symbols. It's
It is.
fascinating, because the Chinese have dragons, the Vikings have dragons, the dragons that go through. Now,
Of course, you got the Coppergate helmet for this one.
yeah, now, however, saying that, if you go back to the Roman times and the Roman conquests, there's the tribe called the Pasalic, and they were renowned for their cavalry, and they would have, it looked like a long serpent, and as they rode along, it would make a funny noise. Now,
This is a Saxon helmet.
this is a very good copy of the Coppergate helm. Now, if you notice, there's serpent.
I'll put it close to the
Yeah.
camera in a minute.
That's Jormungand, I think.
Yes,
was
it
supposed
is.
to represent it. And now, if you can just, the eyebrows and that represent the Irminsul. There, look. And the Irminsul is the pillar of the world. That's the Saxon version.
Move forward the camera
Yeah.
for you.
Shall I point it out?
Yes.
Again? There you have the eyebrows and that. It's like a T shape.
Yeah, look, see it now on the
Yeah,
camera.
and that represents the Irminsul, which is the Saxon version of the world tree, the Yggdrasil. So, yeah, there's symbolism in that. And I'd love to look at the Sutton Hoo helmet, because there's a lot of
Just put it
subtle,
down, it's heavy.
there's a lot of subtle symbolism in that. But the dragons were seen as guarding treasure, as we see in Beowulf, which is Saxon. Yeah, I know. But the dragon-headed ships, and these were to frighten the land spirits. I can't show you at the moment, but I've got dragons on my back. I know you have Fafnir.
You've got loads of seeds on your back.
Yeah, I've got loads of seeds everywhere, mate. But dragons again were looked on as fables, which is still carried on today.
That's one of the things we don't think about. We don't think about the artwork of the Saxons and the Vikings, and there was very clever people. You know, the craftsmanship, the skills, and the artwork they did, and the symbolism. It's all fascinating stuff.
Good grief, I'm losing my hair. But
Where's it going?
yeah, so just
Hello, come back here.
But the thing is,
Oh, it's 5 watching now.
yeah, the high five. The thing is, with the crafts, your father would teach you it when you're about 4 years old
Oh, yes.
onwards, and there are a knack to things the way they're done, but they're fantastic. But the thing I liked about archaeology was the things that didn't come out right. And we used to find where they were doing bowls on the lathe, somebody had stuck a chisel through the side. There was a sole of a shoe that had been repaired and repaired, torn off and thrown out the window. But the best, and I felt so sorry for this person, was a coin die. And it looked fantastic. There was just one problem. He put the script the wrong way round. It should be in reverse. And you no doubt got a shuriken off his boss about it. And throughout time immemorial, he's now known as the bloke who got it wrong. So he could have been the greatest money ever for all we know. But it's just a mistake. And
Well, that's how you learn.
yeah. but he's sort of judged on that now for eternity.
I mean, if yours, let's say you're the manufacturer, you're a Dark Age craftsman, and your job was to cast brooches. And let's say you're casting the same brooch. Let's say you're casting a brooch a bit like this.
Yeah.
Now, you can make 100 of them, and every one would look slightly different.
Mm.
And you, to a degree, you do that on purpose, because you wouldn't want to make them uniformal. And if you made a mistake, and it weren't a bad mistake and it's usable, you'd continue selling it. It's a useful item. But, you know, this is why we don't see the same item twice, isn't it, really? Because every item would have been, to a degree...
Custom built.
Yeah. Though, to a degree, with casting, the castings would have been the same, but over time, your casting's worn, and you could tell that from the castings.
Yeah,
I mean, a good craftsman learns how to make a job perfect, and then learns how to do a job not so perfect.
What I like about the Vikings
It's all done
is
good.
if you're going on campaign, so you bring the wife back, gold or silver or bronze if you can.
Yes.
But to get friendly with the local ladies, you use pewter. And Repton, he was an ex-tutor of mine, put out a request because he couldn't find anything. We're not going to take it off you, but we just want to catalogue any jewellery. And 99% of it was, of course, pewter. So you wonder if there was a trade going on, knocking these pewter stuff out.
Yeah, but if you couldn't afford silver and you could afford pewter, then you would buy pewter.
But I wonder how many times they polished pewter up so bright and said, yes, silver.
Well,
darling.
if you get a pewter ring, and then you can coat it with silver using various methods. One of them will be using mercury, which I do not recommend. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, dragons were, as I say, were a motive that we used quite a lot.
If you're going to say what was the most famous legacy the Vikings had, what would it be?
Famous legacy. It changes. If you'd asked in the 60s and 70s, it would be raiding. And now it's sort of, they've got a legacy of poems and sagas. I would say law.
Law's a very important thing, yes.
Which, if you ask me in the 50s, which I was nothing but a kid, if you ask then, I mean, the word law is actually a Viking word. And I say it astounds most people. Hang on, these guys are yobbos who sail in ships and attack and kill monks. Maybe. But they had law. And they established law courts. The things they were called.
The old thing, yes.
The old thing. You had the law speaker who memorised these laws.
And that could be a lady.
Well, I don't know about that.
The way in Iceland. There was
but also, you would...
Not lady tellers.
Don't start that again. But you'd also have...
That's your fault.
This is because a sign of freedom is your scrammer sacks, and you voted. And this is where you get, in this country, weapon tax or weapon takes. That's where you went to vote, and you had to show weapons, which meant only freemen and men could vote.
So, as you often compare the Dark Ages to the Wild West, so let's say you're going to Northworthy, would you have to give up your weapons?
I think that largely depends upon the person there. Now, if you're feasting, though we have found racks where for your swords, it was considered bad form to draw weapons in the hall.
Yes.
In fact, I think it's mentioned in the Hammerval, but you had your eating utensils. Now, this is where ladies came into their own to stop people getting a bit too familiar. You see that big penannular brooch you've got?
Yeah, oh yes.
Well, what you did, if you're being over familiar with a lady, she would take a brooch out and stab it in the back of your hand, which does tend to take your mind off carnal pleasures.
That reminds me of being in a battle and getting my hand caught on a belt hook.
Well, there were actually laws introduced in Ireland about these brooches because people were getting their eyes gouged out accidentally. Say we're at a meeting and I went like that.
Well, yes.
You got a 4 or 5 inch edged pin that could cut your eye out.
That pin on the penannular brooch is a very sharp point, and you could certainly do some damage with it.
And legislation was actually brought in to limit the size of it, or to stick a cork on the end, which is what you've got. It's
Yes.
an antler.
Yeah, but it is a exceptionally very big one, that.
Yeah, but that is quite normal at
But
one time.
I can't go and get it. The door's locked.
Yeah. But so yeah, you know.
I think it's probably the biggest broach we've got. 5 people watching, so that's good.
Yeah. But
I don't think I think we've had more people watching. Although we've been streaming over an hour now, and of course at some point you've got to get back home.
well, people are having the tea about now as well.
Well, it depends where you are in the world.
Watching.
It's probably a little bit early for our American friends, and God knows what time it is in
They're
Australia.
probably stuck in traffic jams in America.
No, not.
Up on the freeway. But yeah, it's interesting to see the symbolism of the dragon and how it's portrayed. But it always seems to be a negative.
Would they call it a dragon or serpent? Or both?
A worm. I mean, round our way you have the wyvern.
Yes.
And you also have Dracot, which means a place of the dragon. So.
Or Draco is an old word for dragon.
Yeah. Well, say the power station in Dracula.
It's funny how I've not lost that interest in dragons ever since, isn't it?
But it's universal. I mean, if you go to China and
Well,
Japan,
of course so, yes.
how did he get there? Did he come from there? I don't know. I would think that maybe the Vikings had connections with Japan. You think of the samurai sword.
Yeah.
It's pattern
It's
welded.
not a throwback from an old ancient civilization,
And
though.
you think of the dragon. Who else has dragons? Norsemen.
Well, yeah.
And who would trade? The Norsemen. And I wouldn't mind betting that there are traces.
So we have a comment from Safe and a question.
Right.
What animal, stroke creature, would each of you have painted on your shield?
Raven.
Yeah, it would be raven for you. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'll probably have some kind of dragon motive, I think. Well, maybe a boar. Maybe a boar. From
Yeah.
being that we're from, ram.
Well, for me, as I say, it's a raven because I have connections with it. The name Branscombe means Raven Valley, and they are my totem animals.
I think a boar's a bit Saxon for my liking.
Well, Frey, Lord of the Forest,
Yeah,
Gullimbosty,
possibly a dragon motive.
or a wolf.
Wolf even.
But I mean, yeah, as I say, for me, it would have to be the old raven.
Yeah, and we're going to do some videos on shields in the future and how we make our shields. So that's going to be interesting.
Mm.
If we do it this year, maybe do it next year, but I
Of course.
plan something like that.
Yeah.
Because I do want to talk about how we construct a modern shield.
Yeah. Well, there was a program on Time Team by Regia Anglorum, and it was showing you the glue he made, which was a traditional
Yes,
glue.
you said about this.
Yeah. Using
Well, what was it made out of?
stale beer and milk and bonfire ash,
Well, perhaps we could try that one day.
and the scum that comes off, that's your glue.
So I do like experimental
Yeah.
archaeology and trying these things.
Yeah.